Hello, my name is Simon Double and welcome to Inside the Rails, a monthly podcast for horse racing enthusiasts everywhere. And as ever, I'm joined by my co-host Phil Boyle from BG Racing. Hi Phil, how are you?
Hi Simon, all good thanks. Yep, I'm looking forward to our regular monthly catch-up and another great guest, no doubt. We've definitely got some good feedback on the Mike Chasemore interview last month, so if anybody listening to this one has missed that one, it's well worth downloading. And yeah, we've got a fairly established listener base now, but it would be great to be introduced to some new people. So if you're listening to this, it would be great if you could share details of the podcast on your social media or directly to any of your horse racing friends.
Absolutely. Well plugged, well plugged. Yes, I'm still chuckling at Mike's anecdotes about Khalid Abdullah and Cilla Black. Well, fear not, dear listeners, we have another great guest on today's show, Andrew Black, who founded the betting company Betfair and who owns the 340-acre Chasemore Farm stud in Surrey with his wife Jane. Now, I suppose, Phil, a bit like the Daily Express, we ought to touch upon the recent heatwave. So, how did Mr. and Mrs. B cope with those eye-watering temperatures?
Not brilliantly, I must admit. Yeah, listeners might remember from a previous episode that my wife and I are walking the Thames Bath in stages. Well, we chose the Saturday and Sunday before the two record-breaking hot days for our latest excursion. So we were out in Oxfordshire along the Thames in very warm weather with probably too little to drink. And it's fair to say after those 2 days, I spent the 2 really hot days in my shady corner of the office, not wanting to venture back outside. I thought it was good to see a lot of the racing was cancelled during those couple of days, though. We've got to consider the horse welfare. It's not just the horses overheating on the track, of course, but many of them have long journeys in a hot horse box that they have to go through. So, yeah, I thought cancelling the racing was a sensible precaution to take. And I know that a lot of trainers and their stable teams had some really early starts to get all the horses exercised before the highest temperatures hit each day, just making sure that all the horses were well looked after.
Well, believe it or not, Phil, I spent the second day of the heatwave, believe it or not, in a cinema watching Maverick with some friends. I hasten to add it was something that had been booked a couple of weeks ago, but that was interesting. But enjoyed the film. Yeah, talking about horses and equine welfare, I'm very fortunate in that Amy Murphy, my trainer, has an air-conditioned horse box, but more of that later on. Now, how have the BG racing horses fared over the last month?
Yeah, it's not been a great month, actually. Far Too Beautiful was still sore after her last run at Newmarket, which we think was probably just she was a little bit uncomfortable running on ground firmer than she really likes. And then proving that injuries coming through, she then kicked herself and cut a hind leg and then suffered from an equine version of cramp after some exercise, and she needs some veterinary treatment for that as well. So she hasn't been a very happy horse this month. It might have been brought on by the warm weather, but she's having a few easy days in the shade at the moment. So she seems to be recovering okay. We won't run her on fast ground again, so we need to wait for some rain for her anyway. So realistically, she probably wouldn't have run even if she'd have been fully fit. So no long-term damage done, and she's in good spirits. Some of our listeners might have seen on my social media, I posted a photo. I went to see her and she'd eaten all the carrots I took to see her, and then was trying to get her nose into my pocket to see if I had any more. She didn't quite believe they were all gone. I did manage to go racing with Dynamic Kate again in July, though. We went to Worcester. Again, that wasn't the day we were hoping for as well. She came to challenge at the last. She might well have won, but she stumbled astride after the last, and she gave poor old Adam Wedge no chance to stay in the saddle. So it was no prize money for us and an injured shoulder for Adam. So not a great day all around, although thankfully no long-term damage done to either. Kate will be back racing at the end of August, and Adam might be a little bit longer than that, unfortunately, but hopefully he'll be back in the saddle soon. What about you? What about the Solario racing runners in July? Twilight Bay and Dancing in the Woods both had their first run since joining Amy Murphy's, didn't they?
Yes, well, a bit like you, it sounds like you've not had the best month in the world, and I've had mixed fortunes as well. Yeah, Dancing in the Woods, you mentioned, Woody, as he's known as by his owners. He had a lot in his favour going to York. The ground was right, handicap mark was good. Top jockey booked. We had another Group 1 jockey riding him in 3 times former champion jockey Sylvester de Souza. But he couldn't really cope with a very flat and fast 6 furlongs at York. It all happened a bit too quickly for him. Having said that, I mean, he was 9th, but he was still only beaten about 4 3/4 lengths. I've been feeling for a while that we need to step the horse back up to 7 furlongs. So that's what we're doing very soon. He's going back to one of his favourite tracks, Newmarket, on the 29th of July, but that will be before this podcast gets published, but hoping he'll run well there. Twilight Bay ran on the same day as Dynamic Kate, and any hopes we had of a quickfire double for Inside the Rails soon went out the window. We didn't have much luck either. She disappointed, but there were mitigating circumstances, and we'll come on to those in a future podcast.
Ah, mysterious. We did have a winner between us, though, didn't we? I wanted to save the best for last and give you a chance to finish your review on a positive note. I was absolutely delighted to see your 2-year-old Tarantino winning in July. You must have been thrilled with that.
Elated, I think is the word. Elated and a little surprised. Surprised in that we managed to turn around a 6-length deficit when behind a Mark Johnston horse, Venetian, who went off the odds-on favourite at Redcar. Anyway, the straight 7 furlongs at Redcar suited us much more than the bends of Lingfield. We made all under Stefano Cerci and won by a comfortable 1 1/4 lengths. We always knew, Amy and myself, we always knew that he was half decent, but it's nice to see it vindicated on the racecourse, isn't it? I should just say that Amy, having an air-conditioned horse box, I'm sure made a huge difference to his performance. He walked off the box at the course with not a bead of sweat on him, whereas other horses I hear were dripping when they arrived at the course. I should hasten to add that they did have time to cool off. For the listeners' benefit, most horses will get to a track about 3 hours beforehand to cool off and relax. So, but no, the air-conditioned box definitely helped, I'm sure.
I shall be needing to ask Amy if I can maybe move my office in there on days when she's not got runners, maybe. No, it was absolutely brilliant to see that, though. Did you have any new shareholders involved in Tarantino who hadn't previously had a winner? Because, that feeling that people can get from being involved in their first winner, I know is pretty special, even if you only own a small part of the horse. I once had one of my shareholders who didn't like all-weather racing, and as luck would have it, he had his first win on the all-weather at Wolverhampton, and on the way home he said, "Don't tell anyone, but that was the best day at the races I've ever been to." So did you have anybody that had that experience?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a 12-share horse, and I'm delighted to say the horse is fully subscribed, but Redcar's quite a long way to go. Most of the owners are based down south. But Matt and Louise Simmons, a young couple enjoying their first year of married life, they drove there and back in a day from Essex, and it's their first share with Solaria Racing. And the other owner, who was there, David Gibbons, whom I've known for a long while through networking originally, he went, and it's his first share ever in any horse. So, yeah, they were all delighted.
Yeah.
So it was a lovely day, fantastic. Now, the big news story of July in horse racing was the changes to the whip rules, whereby horse and jockey can now lose a race if the new rules are transgressed. Your thoughts on this, Phil?
Yeah, obviously it's a subject that impacts on how people outside the sport feel about horse racing, so it definitely needs to be considered. I must admit that having never ridden a horse, I don't feel particularly well placed to comment on what's right and wrong, but I am pretty sure, having spoken to many people who I feel would be strongly against the whip if they felt that horses were sort of getting hurt as a result of it, that definitely isn't the case. But as for the correct use of the whip, that's one I'd rather leave to the experts. That the fundamentals surely have to be the welfare of the horse and the jockeys, though. I do think it's a tool for communication between the jockey and the horse. Obviously, in some cases, that's to tell the horse it's time to go faster, but sometimes it might be to tell the horse to concentrate or to straighten up. And if that's the case, and that helps to avoid interference or falls, then having the whip becomes a safety issue. And whatever the public perception might be, my experience is that people in racing really care about the horses. And if those people are involved in deciding what's the right balance for using the whip, and I think they have been, then I wouldn't want to argue with that and suggest that they're not putting the right rules in place.
Yes, look, it is a tricky one. I realise for public perception that probably something had to change, but there is a very small minority out there who'd like to see horse racing banned, and I think there are even some people out there who probably like to see horses not even being ridden. So I don't think we're ever going to convince them, whatever changes we make to the whip rules. So it is a tricky one. I guess something had to be done, but we'll see how it all pans out, won't we? Now, the small size fields is something we've touched upon before. It's still a hot topic of debate, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still definitely an issue. There was a lot of races the day before we recorded, a lot of races with sort of single figure fields, I noticed. And so it's definitely still been a problem. But, then again, we had Dynamic Cape balloted out of a race early in July as there were too many runners declared. So I think we need to look at the type of races we're putting into the programme and not just a number of them. It is crazy when we're worried about the lack of runners that we had several horses that day that wanted to race and had to sit in their stables because we couldn't get them in. The other story at the moment is small attendances at racecourses, along with the small numbers of runners, and that's a different ball game. I'm not really sure what's caused that. I have to say that whilst I'm sure it's real, I've not noticed it as much as people have been talking about it when I've been racing. I've felt there's been a good atmosphere and a decent crowd on the occasions I've been, but I don't know if you've got a different experience to that.
Well, Phil, look, there's a generation out there, isn't it, who've never experienced 10% inflation. And I think there's no doubt people are feeling the pinch a little bit. Mm-hmm. From what I can tell, the big meetings, which have had to be pre-booked, like Royal Ascot, Cheltenham, the recent John Smith's meeting, they've done very well. I think there was, when I was at York the other day, 26,500 people, I think, that were there, which was pretty much what they'd expect. But I think the bread and butter meetings, where people might just decide to go at the last minute, I think those might be suffering a little bit. People are saving their pennies. Having said that, I did some hospitality at Windsor last night and there was a really good crowd there. So I think it is a bit mixed. But let's look at the action on the track. Glorious Goodwood, the Galway Festival, they're now upon us, but they'll have come and gone before we go on air. But we've had some great action on the flats, haven't we? And I have to say, let's give some syndicates a real good plug here. Amazing to see Sabuska win a Group 2 at York for Sam Hoskins and Kennet Valley Thoroughbreds. A big well done to them. The King George, one of the big races of the year, produced an unexpected result for many, with Pile Driver winning his second Group 1 at odds of 18-1. The purists may not have liked the result, but great to see a smaller yard, trainers William Muir and Chris Grassick coming home with the spoils.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, Pile Driver was a surprise to many for him to win, including me, really, although I must admit I did think he was overpriced, and I backed him each way, which made for a very good Saturday. Done. Yeah,
well done, you.
And in behind Pile Driver was Misriff. We talked last month about unlucky horses and whether this horse would have won under different circumstances, etc. Well, Misriff was another one of those that was deemed to be unlucky back in the Eclipse Stakes in July, wasn't he? Although he's been a fantastic horse for his owner, he's won Grade 1 races in Saudi Arabia and Dubai as well as the UK. But yeah, before the Eclipse, he was described as a bit disappointing this year, but he came second there, and as I say, arguably unlucky, and he then came second in the King George. So if he's having a disappointing season, I want more disappointing horses. Yeah, on a personal note, I was sad to see Inspiral lose her unbeaten record in the Falmouth Stakes.
Yes.
But if she had to lose, then losing to Prosperous Voyage was the right result for me. I backed that one each way at 22-1 as well. So
well done again.
Quite a good month. Yeah, I was hoping she'd be second, and obviously I got more than I bargained for there. Incidentally, after our discussion last month about the well-publicised sabbatical between Frankie Dettori and John Gosden, he was back on Inspiral just a couple of weeks later. What did you make of that?
Well, I think probably both of them realised, didn't they, that it had all got a bit out of hand in public. So, look, Messrs Gosden and Dettori, they've had their tiff, a bit like a pair of lovers, I guess. They've made up, which is great, and we move on. And I know that John Gosden was very keen to move on. So, what are your plans, Phil, for August with BG Racing?
Yeah, it should be quite a quiet one in terms of racing. Far Too Beautiful won't run until it gets softer, and I'm not sure there's a lot of prospect of that at the moment. Dynamic Cape can't run until the end of the month at the earliest, as there's a couple of weeks jumps break at the start of August, just to save the clerks of the course having to keep the ground, really watered for the jumps action. Definitely be up at my two stables. I hope I can get some of my shareholders up there for a morning on the gallops, and I'm actually off up to Birmingham for 10 days to watch the Commonwealth Games, so that should be good. Okay. Yeah, what about you? Anything planned?
Yes, Solaria Racing could be pretty busy. I mentioned Woody running at Newmarket very shortly. Twilight Bay has got a couple of entries that she'll have for Chelmsford next week. So hopefully we can get back on the score sheet again. Well, listeners, I'm delighted to say we have our special guest, Andrew Black, on the line. Hi, Andrew. Welcome to Inside the Rails. How are you?
Hi there, I'm well.
Excellent. Well, look, really do appreciate, Phil and I really appreciate